O'Brien became the first British woman to scale the second tallest mountain in the world, K2. It's known as the Savage Mountain because of its technical challenges, and 1 in 4 climbers who summit the peak will die on the way down. Well, Vanessa's actually got dual nationality, British and American, which explains the accent. I spoke to her a little earlier.
I am the 3rd British woman to stand on the summit of K2. The question is, how do you define climbed or conquered? And this goes back a little bit to Sir Edmund Hillary, who always defined a full climb or conquering of a mountain as coming back round trip. That you had to live to see the full thing and come round trip. And part of it was what Sir Edmund Hillary was protecting, which was, the ascent of Everest, and whether Mallory or Irving might have gotten there first. So there's a little bit of that there. But I think in mountaineering lore, or, if you go back through time, you'll find that a lot of people along a hard line will look at it as that you have to go round trip. So that's where that comes from. But I have a lot of respect for my 2 peers who were certainly there at the summit before me.
And who were they? Did they not make it back?
Yeah, they didn't make it back. So in 1986, which, believe it or not, 1986, and that is so recent. Let me tell you how recent 1986 is, just to remind your listeners. That was the year of the film Top Gun. That was the year that Rock Me Amadeus was Song of the Year. That is how frequent and new 1986 was. That is the first year that not only a woman became the first woman to climb K2, but we lost 2 women to climb K2 that year, and one of them was Britain's Julie Tullis. The second time we lost a British woman was 1995, and that was Alison Hargreaves. So, in fact, in the history of time, and even till today, I am the 20th woman to stand on the summit of K2, and the 3rd British woman, if you will, to stand on the summit of K2, but 20th woman overall.
You see, I suppose somewhere...
It sounds confusing.
No, it's not confusing. I was just wondering how sad it is that even though it was so relatively recently, that we lost these 2 peers of yours from climbing the mountain, how quickly we forget these things. I seem to remember now that you say it, and you've triggered my imagination, that we did lose some climbers on K2 previously. But, I was at university at the time trying to get a degree, so what did I know about mountaineering? When you bring it back up again, it's actually quite sad, isn't it, that people who would have been on the level of Edmund Hillary or otherwise in terms of what they achieved are quickly forgotten if they didn't conquer it in the way that Hillary defines it, as you put it. What is so treacherous about K2 that the descent has claimed 2 great British climbers?
Well, actually, it's not necessarily K2. It's any 8,000-meter peak, of which there's 14 in the world. There are 14 8,000-meter peaks, and that's it. They're all in Asia. So if you want height or you want to climb the big boys, that's where they are. You can't find them anywhere in the world, and you have to count to about 110 until you get out of Asia, and then you're in the Andes. So all of the height in the world, if you want mountains, you look to that side. And it's those in particular that cause harm because they are so high. You are climbing at just the very, very, let me say, you could say the bottom of the stratosphere or the very, very top of the troposphere. So the very, very, the troposphere and everything below is where all the weather patterns take place. All the clouds, all the jet streams, everything that we know as a weather pattern. So when you're at the very, very top of that, and these jet streams, these winds are, 100 kilometers, 200 kilometers an hour, you can't stand there. I mean, that will just pick you up and drop you down, 10,000 meters, right? I mean, these winds are so strong, you can't possibly withstand them. So you're battling forces much stronger than, a human being. And that's what I find actually most difficult are the winds. But you also have precipitation. You have very, very deep snow. You have, whiteout conditions, hazardous conditions like avalanches. You have crevasses. All of these things work against you to create something that is just so hard to get to the top of, much less get down. And it takes some effort actually to get to the top because, of course, you're working against gravity, but it takes very, very little effort to fall down, especially after 16 hours and, when you're extremely dehydrated and tired and, you've given all of your energy to get to, say, the summit. And that's why 85% of accidents happen on descent.
Does that play on your mind as you're climbing up? Does that thought play on your mind that what goes up must come down? I still have to... my great challenge is coming down if I succeed in reaching the top.
It does. And so, another way to ask that question is, what do you do at the summit? And, only in films do you see the high fives and the, dancing up and down and, that Hollywood moment. And in reality, you arrive knackered. You hopefully get a good enough day to where you can take a summit photo, maybe a photo of, a flag and a picture, but you are programmed as a mountaineer to know that you are halfway, and halfway is nothing, 50%, nothing. And, like ourselves, where we really threaded a needle and took quite a bit of risk to get there after our third season, we were coming down in the dark. So, there's a whole lot of, I guess, apprehension about descending because we know that most of the work is ahead of us, not behind us.
Ourselves? We?
Yes. I was a team of 12.
Oh, does that count then still?
Well, each person, it's funny, in the old days, teams were registered, well, I guess always... one country at a time could register in the old days. So, like the 1953 Everest expedition, that was a British registered expedition. It was Swiss before that. So countries would register in certain days for certain years. And K2 was not dissimilar. You had British expeditions, you had American expeditions, you had, in the first expedition to conquer K2 was technically Italian in 1954. So, but the summit certificates are given out to individual names. So, the 12 individuals who summited K2 this year receive a summit certificate in each of their names. So even though we register as an expedition group and say I am the expedition leader, of which I was, each individual member of that team gets a certificate if they stood on the summit.
But K2 is different though, isn't it? Whatever the challenges that other 8,000 metre peaks pose, K2 is known as the Savage Mountain, and I'm presuming that's not for nothing.
Yeah, that's it gets that reputation primarily from the statistics. So for every 4 that climb, 1 dies, and there's 84 individuals who have died at the Gilkey Memorial, which is at the base of K2. I did a lot of work there the previous year. I went with a Scottish climber last year, Di Gilbert. She and I went and took inventory of all the names of the previous people who had climbed before us and found 20 missing plaques. And those plaques happen to have dated back something like 37 years across 13 nationalities. And so I went and I had them engraved in Rawalpindi, which is used to be an old military base in Pakistan. Mm-hmm. And I brought them back this year and hung them at the Gilkey Memorial so that we could have every climber that had lost their lives represented. And I feel strongly about that because for me, these are the real pioneers and heroes that came before me that took the risk, using inferior equipment, no weather data, sometimes no oxygen. They had very little information, and they really climbed in what I consider, although I had really bad conditions, they had much less information. So I have a lot of respect for all of them, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be able to go and pay respect to them.
What kind of information are you talking about? Is it weather patterns and that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Anything from logistics to weather to, anything that might have improved with technology. Even the materials that we use today that help us, stay warmer, wicking, all of these things I think help us. Everything, not every year, but every couple of years, I think there's advancements that probably enhance the extreme environments in which we find ourselves.
Yeah, you say that, but then it's like, I suppose, running the 400 meters or the marathon in an Olympics, that maybe the trainers, the running shoes might get more technically better design-wise, but it's still hard work, isn't it?
There's no doubt about it.
Yeah,
you still have to. You're still going, 8 kilometers up, right?
Yeah.
And you have to climb those 8 kilometers. Nobody's going to climb that for you. Those are your feet.
And arguably your feet, amongst other things, is you're also the oldest woman to have climbed it. So there are other.
I don't know that I like to advertise that.
I knew you were going to say that. I was thinking about my wife. I was thinking, would she like me to mention that? I haven't said how old you are. You could be 24 for all we know. It works on radio.
Somehow it's very distinguished for men to be able to, kind of make that claim.
Fair
but
enough. You got me.
But it's just, I haven't seen it work on women so well. And I know every decade is the decade younger. It's like, gray is the new black, or black is the new gray, or whatever. It's never quite worked that way.
You'll be pleased to know that I'm older than you, okay? That sets the record straight somewhat.
Okay.
However, the point I was trying to make is that the challenges don't diminish, do they? The mountain is still savage, and with all the technology that you can revert to, as you said, your ascent was probably more treacherous than other people had done. So technology can help to a certain point, but there is still a challenge to get up there, and it's still a challenge to get up there in the way that you got up there.
Well, let's say this. We can say this absolutely unconditionally. A higher age will not help you.
No. Yeah. Well,
so that will work against you. The only way it can possibly help you is you have more experience to calm down.
Well, why is that important?
Because there's a lot of time when weather will come in, it will make delays. Unexpected delays can occur, something like that. And I think if you're younger, there's a sense of wanting everything to happen now.
Yeah, that's what the youngers are like.
Right. I mean, they want it now.
Yeah.
And they cannot stand when things don't happen, now, or there's a delay, and if a battery dies, where's the entertainment? You've got to quiet the mind. So if you're a little bit older, at least you have the capability to just, relax and
not make rash decisions, perhaps.
Yeah, and just chill. It's okay to, let a little bit of time pass, not rush things. The mountain teaches you're not in control. That's the number one rule.
And you don't make the rules.
You don't make the rules. So it's you have to, forego that there's somebody, someone, a deity, a higher being, and almost become more in tune to the fact that you cannot micromanage everything that's about to take place.
In those terms, I wonder if anybody ever really conquers a mountain. It feels to me like you're like the cowboy in the rodeo who manages to sit on the bucking horse, and the bucking horse says, okay, I will have my day. It may not be with you, it might be with the next person that tries to ride me, but I will have my day.
I think that's a great analogy because, if the bucking horse is the mountain and let's say it throws you off by an avalanche, sometimes it will allow you to summit and sometimes it won't. It completely depends, and it's random. So it doesn't, and that's the funny thing is there was a great phrase, I think it was Reinhold Messner, he said, mountains are not, how did he say it? He said, mountains are not fair or unfair, they're just dangerous. So you should never take it personally, whether you summit or don't summit. It's not that you're a good or a bad mountaineer. They're just dangerous. And maybe you were lucky, maybe the weather worked out for you, maybe you were technically brilliant over this particular passage, but, never think that you have a secret relationship with the mountain. It just doesn't work that way.
There is a moment, though, isn't there? And you've mentioned how treacherous the summit is, but there must be a moment when you reach there. You've got nowhere else to go upwards, and something, I imagine, comes over you. What how do you feel?
I don't think those feelings are so much on the summit. I think those are sort of rites of passage. One of the things I was thinking was because the conditions were so terrible on the way up. I called it sort of Dante's Inferno, and it was almost like for every 100 meters of those 1,000 meters, there were the 9 circles. It was like a passage, but at the summit, it was a bright bluebird day, and it was almost like a test. Like, were you going to be able to get through this test? And if you did get through the test and you were willing to persevere, then I will show you a mountaintop of a summit that has blue skies. And that's when you'll have your meltdown.
Yeah.
So, and it could be any number of things. It could be, should I turn back? Questioning whether the avalanche will happen versus how much time or progress you're making. Questioning all sorts of things. Of course you'll have those conversations because any rational person would. It's over 16 hours. If you ever stood still for 16 hours, it's incredibly long and incredibly boring. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to have fun. And you're sitting there in sort of a queue of 12 other people and looking around to make sure everybody else is kind of okay in the middle of this whiteout, that nobody's acting sloppy or slipping or falling or you kind of, signs of high altitude is when they start to look like they had a little too much to drink. So you're looking for signs of people looking like they might be in trouble, and if you have to take them down or maybe administer high altitude medicine. But I didn't see any of that. But I had the strongest team I've ever climbed with this season, absolutely. And they were from China, from Iceland, from places that are really comfortable with cold, extreme weather.
Unfortunately, Vanessa, we have come to the summit of this conversation. I do feel euphoric, actually. However, now comes the treacherous descent. Remember at the very beginning, the descent takes you back to where you started from. And at the very beginning of this conversation, I asked you whether you are definitively the first British woman to have conquered Everest.
Yep.
If you are definitively the first British woman to have conquered K2.
Yep.
And you said that's a great question because there were these people who were there before you, but whether you define that as conquering because they didn't survive the ascent or not. Actually, the great question is whether you're the first British woman to have ever conquered Everest, and listeners keenly will have heard that you've got something of a twang, whether from the other side of the Atlantic, Yankee-wise or otherwise.
Yep. So I have a dual national citizenship. I've been married to a British citizen for 20 years, so I live here.
Oh well, you're one of us then.
I'm one of you. So, yes, I have a British passport, and I carried the Union Jack to the summit along with the UN Women.
That's
and
what
I
we
was
like to hear. That's what we like
very,
to hear.
very proud to do so.
And we're so glad that you carried the Union Jack instead of the Stars and Stripes.
Thank you.
Yeah, Vanessa O'Brien there, one of us, the first British woman to scale the second tallest mountain in the world and come down to tell the tale, as she pointed out there.